وَإِذْ بَوَّأْنَا لِإِبْرَاهِيمَ مَكَانَ الْبَيْتِ أَلَّا تُشْرِكْ بِي شَيْئًا وَطَهِّرْ بَيْتِيَ لِلطَّائِفِينَ وَالْقَائِمِينَ وَالرُّكَّعِ السُّجُودِ وَأَذِّن فِي النَّاسِ بِالْحَجِّ يَأْتُوكَ رِجَالًا وَعَلَى كُلِّ ضَامِرٍ يَأْتِينَ مِنْ كُلِّ فَجٍّ عَمِيقٍ.
The next reconstruction after the time of Abdullah Zubair occurs 10 years on. So we're now in 74 Hijrah, 693 AD. The leader of the Muslims, Abdul Malik, the son of Marwan Hakam in Damascus, sends an order to his governor in Makkah called Hajjaj bin Yusuf. He tells Hajjaj, I want you to demolish the walls of the Kaaba and bring it back to the dimensions and the design during the time of Qurayshi when the Prophet was alive. There was no reason to reconstruct at this time because the walls were fine, they were not damaged, there were no floods at the time to cause any damage to the walls. But this is what Abdul Malik wanted, so Hajjaj now breaks down the walls above the ground and he brings back the crescent, the Hatim. He reduces the walls from the eastern and western side from 15 meters to 12 meters. He seals off the western door that was now put back again, but he raises also the eastern door back to its original height. The only change he does not do from the last reconstruction is to change the height of the Kaaba itself, because the height of the Kaaba is at now about 13 meters high, and he leaves it at that time. During the time of Qurayshi, it was about 8.6 meters. This construction goes on for just over 950 years, and there is no changes to it. Therefore, in the year 1039 Hijrah, 1630 AD, there was a lot of damage done to the walls due to the floodings at the time. So the walls of the Kaaba were so damaged they had to be reconstructed. And the reconstruction was ordered by the Turkish king Murad Khan. So he ordered the repairs, but he now put in two new things. He said all this water that is coming and going around the bottom of the walls of the Kaaba is seeping into the walls and rising up the walls. Therefore he built what is called the Shazrawan, the wrap around the Kaaba, which is effectively now a marble built around a strip around the whole of the walls of the Kaaba. And this stops the water when it's surfacing on the floor to get into the walls. So that's the first improvement he did to stop the water soaking into the walls. Secondly, on the eastern door, he put in inscriptions of Quranic verses. And those inscriptions are there in their form until today. The next construction now occurs after 330 years. And this is fairly recent in our times, in the year 1377 Hijrah, 1958 AD. And this is now ordered by King Faisal of Abdul Aziz of Saudi. The walls were in good condition, but the roof was now deteriorating. So a massive reconstruction of the roof was now undertaken during this time. The height of the roof was 13 meters. It was increased by a meter to about 14 meters, which is what it is now. But also, there is a false ceiling. So on the roof itself, on the top, about 1.2 meters, there is another false ceiling. Now, I could not trace when this false ceiling was constructed, and there is no reason structurally or functionally to have this false ceiling. And the distance of about 1.2 meters, an average man could not even stand between these two areas. So you've got to stoop down or kneel down. That is the amount of space between the roof and the false ceiling. This false ceiling also supported the roof on the top through the wooden rafters, and these in turn were supported by roof trusses on 3 columns. And those 3 columns are in exactly the same position now. On the roof at the time, the kiswa, which was tied to the ropes, was supported on the roof by wooden rods going across all the 4 sides of the roof. And because this kiswa, the cloth of covering the Kaaba, was getting heavier and heavier, it needed a more stronger material. So King Faisal now ordered the replacement of the wooden rods, and there are now iron bars. And until today, you can see that if you go onto the second floor of the Haram itself and you look down on the Kaaba, when you look at the roof, you will see iron bars on the four sides of the roof. The third change he did was inside the Kaaba. The stairs going from the Kaaba up to the roof were made of wooden rungs. He now replaced them with aluminium material, which is about 50 steps spirally going round from the Kaaba inside to the roof on the top. The next major construction was 35 years on, in the year 1414 Hijrah, which is also very current, 1993 AD. And this was the last major reconstruction done from then until now. The walls was now structurally sound, there was no problem. The roof was also fine. But the external of the walls had now become eroded. And the mortar and the cement between the stones was also now becoming loose. So what King Fahd did was he ordered the repolishing of all the external walls around the Kaaba, and he also asked that the mortar between the stones should now be replaced. So they had specially machines done to suck the mortar that was presently available. That old mortar was sucked out, the cracks were made clean, and a new crack using special adhesive mixed with the stones that were crushed, which had come from the mountains nearby. So the crushed stones with the special adhesive was now injected into these cracks. They were then polished and etched, and what you now see is walls that are clean and polished, and the mortars or the cement in between are also clean and polished. What is interesting to know is that when they suck this mortar out of the walls, they also found ends, white ends. And this goes back during the time of the Prophet. During the time of the Prophet, he was isolated for 3 years by an order by the Qurayshi government. And the order was written, and that order was hung in the Kaaba, in one of the pillars of the Kaaba. After about 3 years, the Prophet was now telling the Qurayshi government that the order, the decree that you had signed to isolate me is now no longer valid. Because if you go inside the Kaaba, you will see that order which was written on has all now been eaten by the ants. And indeed that is what it was. When they went to check in the Kaaba, that order, all those writings were eaten up by the ants except for the word Allah. It is therefore interesting to see that those same ants, thousands years later on, were still present in the Kaaba itself. So when we now look at all these renovations that occurred from the time of Prophet Ibrahim until current, we see that the renovations were all done above the ground. The foundations were never touched. During the time of reconstruction in 64 Hijrah by Abdullah Zubair, he asked all the tribal chiefs to come and look at the foundations around the Kaaba. And they all noticed that those foundations were structurally sound, there was no defect. And all the renovations that occurred were always above the ground. The walls and the hatim was all above the grounds, the foundations were never touched. Which gives credence that these foundations were indeed divine and angelically laid. So that gives an overview of the reconstruction of the walls of the Kaaba from the time of Prophet Ibrahim as we see it now. And now during the time of Hajj, the cloth on the Kaaba is raised halfway up, so we can actually see the bare walls about halfway up. The reason that the Kiswa is raised halfway up because of the huge crowds during the time of Hajj. And in order to avoid people when they come to touch the walls to try and pull the Kaaba, the Kiswa down, that is why it is raised halfway up. But during the time of Hajj, we can clearly see these walls. And after Hajj, the Kiswa is then brought down to cover the whole height of the wall.
المتكبر الخالق البارئ المصور الغفار القهار الوهاب الرزاق الفتاح العليم.
So what is inside the Kaaba itself? Recent pictures and recent footage shows that inside the Kaaba are the 3 columns that are supporting the roof. These columns are in exactly the same position that was done during the earlier times. We know that the floor is now marble completely, and the walls are also marbled. About halfway up the walls, there is a green curtain, and on the curtains are inscriptions of Quranic verses. On the lower half of the walls, there are about 10 plaques, which are commemorating the various renovations undertaken by the various governments. There is no window inside the Kaaba, but there is another door called the Door of Tawbah. So if you go up the eastern wall, immediately to the right, on the corner to the northern wall is this Door of Tawbah. And this is the one that has got this aluminium spiral staircase which leads to the roof. The question now is asked, inside the Kaaba, where is the Qibla? Outside the Kaaba, the Qibla is around the Kaaba itself. And away from the Kaaba, we always point towards Makkah. But there is a hadith which says, when the Prophet went inside the Kaaba from the eastern wall, and he prayed facing the western wall. So inside the Kaaba, as you come up the door which is existing today, immediately opposite, he actually put a nail there during his time to show that is the direction he used to pray when he was inside. That nail now is obviously probably not there because it is all marbled. And the wall on the western side is also sealed. The inside of the Kaaba is cleaned twice a year, and it is cleaned with Zamzam water and rose water. And the cleaning is normally done by the dignitaries of the government and the royalty, and it is done about 2 weeks before Ramadan and 2 weeks before the start of the month of Zil Hajj.
الحق الوكيل القوي المتين الولي الحميد المحصي المبدئ المعيد المحيي المميت الحي القيوم.
Let us now look at the kiswa. What is kiswa? Kiswa is the cloth that is covering the 4 walls of the Kaaba. It is estimated in the recent times to make one kiswa costs about 20 million Saudi riyals. That's approximately 3 million British pounds. That's a lot of money. And why does it cost so much? Because the material that is used, the cloth that is used, the black cloth that we see, it is made out of pure silk. And this cloth is lined on the back with a white pure cotton. And all the inscriptions that we see on the 4 clothes are actually made from pure golden thread. The cloth itself weighs about 700 kilograms, and the inscriptions, the golden inscriptions, weigh about 150 kilograms. And every year a new kiswa is made, and there is always one in spare in case it is needed. So what happens to the old kiswa when it is changed? When the old kiswa is changed, it is cut into pieces, it is given to dignitaries, it's given to foreign governments, to foreign embassies, and to various international institutions and museums. The kiswa is changed on the day of the 9th of Zil Hajj, a day before the Eid al-Hajj itself. This is the time when the pilgrims are in the plains of Arafah that it is changed. Even when it is changed, the locals who are there, the circumambulation does not stop. How is the kiswa held in place? On the top, it is tied by ropes to the rings of the cloth, and those ropes are then tied to the iron bars around the 4 walls of the roof. On the bottom, when it is pulled tight, these are then tied down to rings. These are brass rings which are in fact attached to the shazrawan, the wraparound at the bottom of the floor. When did the kiswa covering start? It started about 200 years before Hijrah, when the king of Himer, Abu Karab Aswad, put a door in the 2 openings. He also said not only would we cover the 2 openings, we should also cover the walls of the Kaaba itself. So the covering started then. And over the time, the color of the kiswa has changed. It used to go from red to white to green and to black as it is now. The black color started during the time of leader Ma'mun al-Rashid during the year 800 Hijrah, about 1400 AD, and that is the color that is used until down. There is another covering called the burqa. This is the covering which covers the door. It drapes the door on the eastern wall as we see today. Again, during the season of Hajj, this burqa is also raised halfway up so we can see the door itself. The burqa size is about twice the size of the door, so it drapes the door completely. Again, it's made of the same material like the kiswa, silken cloth, pure cotton lining, and golden thread inscriptions. Who started making this kiswa? The records show that we can trace it back to 737 Hijrah. That's about 1370 AD, and it came from Egypt. At the time, the king Saleh Ayyub said we must make the kiswa to go to Mecca, and therefore the kiswa needed a lot of money to make. So he chose 3 provinces in Egypt. He said all the taxes that are collected from these 3 provinces will be used to make the kiswa. And in time, those 3 provinces were extended to 10 provinces. Once the kiswa was done, there was a grand ceremony to bring it to the city center in Cairo itself. And in Cairo, there was a military escort, there was a carnival parade. People used to go behind the kiswa, and when it was taken from the city center, brought to the coast of the Red Sea. Then it was put onto dhows, and again there were people following it. So it was a grand ceremony of the kiswa. When it was brought to the eastern coast of the Red Sea in Mecca, it had then to be again transported by land from the coast down to Mecca, from what is now Najd, the central area of Saudi, brought down to Mecca. All this transportation was always accompanied by people in grand clothing and grand ceremonies, what used to be called the mahmil. And this went on for about 550 years, always done in Egypt, brought under great ceremony to the city of Mecca. In the year 1924, when the Saudis first came to power in Hijaz, what is now Saudi, they objected to this process of the mahmil, the parade that goes around with the kiswa. Therefore, they stopped Egypt doing it, and they gave it to Iraq to start doing the kiswa. So for the next 2 years, 1925 AD and 1926, it was given to Iraq, and they brought the kiswa without any mahmil, without any parades, to Mecca. For the next 10 years, from 1927 to 1936 AD, the kiswa was actually manufactured in Mecca itself. They brought in craftsmen from India, and they manufactured locally the kiswa that was used. What is not known is for the next 2 years, 1937 and 1938 AD, where was it made? Records do not tell us that. But certainly after that, from the year 1939 to 1961, that is 23 years, it was returned back to Egypt, with the condition they can make the kiswa, they can bring it to Mecca, but there should be no mahmil parade to go with it. Meanwhile, the Saudis in Mecca built a factory so that they could manufacture the kiswa themselves. And this was opened in the year 1962 on the outskirts of Mecca at a place called Joud. That is there until today, but over the years, that factory is now state of the art, and the kiswa therefore from 1962 is now made locally in Mecca. This factory in Mecca not only makes the kiswa, it also makes the little bag that is used to hold the key to the eastern door of the Kaaba. It also makes the clothing that drapes over the shrine of the Prophet in Medina, and all the national flags of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is also done in this factory. Now, the walls of the Kaaba are pretty large, 15 meters on each side and about 10 meters on the other side. Therefore, it will be impossible to make one continuous piece of clothing to go around it. So what they do is they stitch it in pieces. The height of the Kaaba now is about 14 meters. So they take one piece 14 meters high with about a meter wide. And then they make 47 pieces of this. When these are then done, they are then stitched into 4 pieces. And these 4 pieces are then brought on the day of the 9th of Zil Hajj, and each one is then brought to the roof. It covers the old kiswa. they remove the old kiswa, they put the new kiswa on, and it is rolled down. On each of these kiswa, there is something called the belt, which is called the hazam. This is about 2/3 way up the kiswa. And this is a belt which are of rectangular scripts with various inscriptions on it. Inscriptions that are there are varied, but most of the common ones that are used are La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, Allahu Jalla Jalala, Subhana wa bihamdi, Subhana Allahu Azim, Ya Hannan, Ya Mannan. And also on the kiswa, there are decorative inscriptions. Certainly on the corners, they are circular shaped, and these are in turn inscribed in squares. Alongside it, there are various decorations of the shapes of lantern, and these are also inscribed. The number of these decorations around the hazam, around the belt, varies from year to year. But certainly around each corner and around, you can see them on the kiswa. And that finishes the kiswa part.
إن الحمد والنعمة لك الملك لا شريك لك لبيك اللهم